Listen to some Queen, so I got that in my head. So I'm bopping here. Okay, it's that time. So again, if you're here and you want to chat, go ahead and throw something in the chat. If you're not here, you won't be able to chat because of physics. So this is the live lecture for computational thinking, NTI Week 5. This week we're going to start talking about another library called Datetime, which sounds pretty boring, but it's pretty critical to everything everything that uses software. And some examples that I think I threw out in the Replit assignment are things like it could be as simple as the clock on your oven that makes sure your food does not burn. It could also be something like an IV bag in a hospital where there's a computer regulating the distribution of a prescription drug intravenously or something like that. So it could also be, what controls like an autopilot system, navigation feature. It's just it's everywhere. And I'm going to show you one simple real world example in this lecture. But just know that you do need to know it. And in fact, our final project for this class will deal directly with Datetime in a pretty creative way, I think. But we'll talk about that later on. For today, we're just going to be talking about how we use the Datetime library in a basic sense, like what a datetime object actually is, how we use the string parse time or strip time method, and how we use the string format time method. And we're going to look at a real world example of where datetime really does matter. I'm going to show you some fun stuff in between. For you, this week's assignment, make sure you're continuing to check in on Google Classroom. For this week's check-in, like I said, just post something creative as a representation of how you're spending your time. I get tired of seeing just here. So I'm not saying you have to. You can just say here if you want. But if you want to post something fun to share, you can do that privately or publicly, just so I know you're here. I do want you to skim over the datetime documentation, and I'll show you that really quick, just so you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to Google datetime Python. We're going to get up the 3.8 documentation. So I want you to skim over this, and I particularly want you to look at time delta objects, datetime objects, and these two, the string format time and string parse time behavior in the format codes, okay? I want you to just skim over it so you have an idea of what each of these things is, what its purpose is. You don't need to read it in depth, and I tell you not to read it in depth because documentation can be very overwhelming if you try to read every ounce of it. The short story is you do need to read some of this, like you need to read how datetime is constructed. It's got some arguments here that you need to be aware of. For example, when it gets an hour, it expects it expects that hour in 24-hour clock format. So like 4 o'clock is 16. That's the 16th hour of the day. You might have heard of that as military time, but there's plenty of organizations that use it outside of the military, countries, etc. Okay, so that's date time, and then quickly we'll just go to another one real quick. We'll look at time delta. Time delta is another thing that we're going to be using that's pretty important. So just take a look at these and try to understand how they work and experiment. The most important thing is that you experiment with them in your code. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation real quick. The other things that you need to do this week are complete the Replit assignment called using string parse time and string format time. You need to do that by Friday, and you need to complete the datetime quiz by Friday. Keep in mind that all the quizzes that I give for this NTI, they are open book, open code, open note, etc. They're not open friend, so don't just copy off your friend's answers. That's not doing you any good. So anyway, it is important that you take the time to learn datetime because your last project for this class requires that you understand it. Absolutely. Okay, the new time for lecture, if you didn't know, is Mondays at 11:30, And the office hours are Monday and Wednesday from 8 to 10 p.m. You can reach me at any time between those 2 hours, and I will answer your question instantly. You can ask me questions any other time you want to, but my answer won't come until that night. Okay, let's see. Do I have anything else? No, that's all the slides. So let's go straight to the code and start talking about what datetime is. All right, so we're going to say datetime lecture examples. Sounds good. All right, well, let's pause for a second and just think about how we would represent time in our code, right? You could represent time with something like a string, and you could say, print, it is August 15, or wait, what is today? I'm giving my birthday because I've been using it. May 4th, 2020. All right, there's a date, right? And that's great if all we need to do is say that it is May 4th, 2020. But the instances in code where we just need to say one date or one time are pretty much non-existent unless we're writing a book in code or writing a history book in code. I don't know why you would do that, but anyway, what we really need, what we need for our programs, is a way of dealing with dates and times programmatically. So we can say things like, how many days will it be until my assignment is due? We can do that with code. We could say things like in Google Classroom, right? It'll tell you that if you turn something in late, it's 4 days late. That ability to do that, the ability for Google Classroom to do that, comes from the datetime structure that exists in pretty much all coding languages. Okay, so for Python, we call it the datetime library. For C#, it's something else. For Java, it's something else. But datetime is everywhere in code. It's everywhere in any application that we're using. Let me think of let's think of some other examples. Like if you're going to make a TikTok video, okay? If you're going to make a TikTok video, it's likely that there are maybe filters or something associated with the date. I think about Snapchat too. Like with Snapchat, there's going to be filters associated with a certain date range, and those filters are only available during that date range. So that means, the date time element of that software is important for controlling what filters appear. There's a lot of real-world examples because date time is literally everywhere. I would challenge you to think of as many places you've seen datetime as possible over the course of this week. That'd be an extra bonus challenge right there. Just to think about all the places you've seen either the date, the time, or some combination of both in the software that you use. Okay. In fact, look, here's a datetime right here. Wait, no, hold on. This is that's the default load for Python. So we'll look at a datetime in Replit here in a second. All right. Well, I mean, really, that is a datetime, but it's just not associated with the way Replit's running right now. I don't know what I'm talking about. All right. Let's move on. Let's do some actual code here. So in order to get datetime into our program, the first thing we need to do is import it. So datetime is an oddly named library. The library name is datetime. But then inside of the library, there's also the datetime object. So we have to say from datetime, import datetime. That can lead to some confusion, but generally this is a safe way to go. For almost all of your programs, you're going to need from datetime, import datetime. And then you're going to be using this datetime object. Remember, this is the library. This is the datetime object itself. And then you'll probably also use time delta at some point. So we'll go ahead and throw that in here as well. Time delta. And we're going to talk about what those things are. Okay. Let's do a really simple program that's going to tell me how many hours it has been since I was born. So how many hours has it been since I was born? Interesting question. All right, so for that, the first thing we need to do is we need to identify what was my birthday, and we're going to do that with a datetime object. So I'll say my birthday, and what I have to do at this point is create a datetime object, and that looks like this. So I'll say datetime. All right, and now again, I'm going to let Replit pause here for a second and let me see that datetime expects at a minimum a year, a month, and a day. And then optionally, I can do a minute, second, microsecond, and give it some time zone information. Now, it says again, the year, month, and day arguments are required. So I'm going to start with the year, which is an integer. So I'll say 1988. And I was born in the month 8 and 15. All right, that's the day I was born. So August 15th, 1988. Now, if I want to, I can also include the hour, the minute, and the second. I have no idea what hour, minute, and second I was actually born, so we'll just throw in 4:30, 0 seconds, 4:30 p.m. Okay? Now, hopefully, you thought to yourself that, remember, I looked back at this library and I'm supposed to be using a 24-hour clock, so 4 o'clock in a 24-hour clock is actually 16. There we go. So now it's August 15th, 1988 at 16:30, aka 4:30 p.m. That's my birthday. All right. Now, that's my birthday, and if I run my code and I say my birthday, it's going to show me I have this datetime object. So datetime.datetime. Remember that this part is the library. This is the actual object itself. And 1988, 8:15, 16:30, and the seconds are just not included because I guess it's irrelevant, right? Because 16:30 on the dot, we don't need to know how many seconds are there. All right, every datetime object, if we go back to the documentation and we go to datetime objects, we zoom in a little bit here so you can see, we can look and see that each datetime object has at a minimum a year, month, and a day argument, and that we can then access those attributes programmatically. So I can say datetime.year, oops, not datetime.year, I mean mybirthday.year, 1988, mybirthday.day, mybirthday.month. Okay, so already you should be able to see why using datetime is far preferable from some kind of weird hard-coded string or some kind of set of integers that represent, well, I mean, really, this is a set of integers that represent a date, but it's all organized inside this datetime object. If we went in here and said something like days is 15, or day, and then year is 1988, and month is 8, okay? That's cool, but it's just... it's the foolish way to do it, I guess. It's the naive way to do something like that. And this would not be very robust. Like, it wouldn't be extendable. It would be difficult to use as we continued coding more complex programs. So we use what's given to us, which is datetime, which is built to organize this kind of information. Okay, now we need to know how many hours has it been since I was born. In order to do that calculation, I need to know, well, what is today? Thankfully, Datetime library has two really cool ways of dealing with this. And the first one is datetime.today. So that's just going to give me today, but it'll give me a full datetime object. It'll give me the time and everything like that. I actually prefer to use datetime.now. It's a little more explicit about what I'm asking. I'm saying, what time is it right now? And I could change this to be, right now, but today maybe makes more sense when we look at it in the code. All right. Okay. So I've got today. I've got my birthday. Now, if you think about what do I need to do in order to figure out how many hours has it been since I was born, well, I need to subtract today from my birthday. Or excuse me, vice versa. I need to subtract my birthday from today. What's the difference between today and my birthday? Again, if we went back to that naive example where we just had these, sort of preloaded integers, like year 1980, I should just leave these up here. Day equals 15, you know, how would we end up getting the values we need from that data right there? I don't even know where I would start. I guess it wouldn't be that complex, but again, we've got systems in place to handle this. So all we've got to do here is say today, like think about how would you calculate how many days it's been, right? Which is what we're going to end up needing for the hours. So anyway, let's do this thing. Let's say diff between now and then, now and b-day, okay? That's going to be today minus my birthday. And that's it. That's all you really have to do in order to get this value that you're going to need. So let's check our variables here. We've got my birthday. We've got today, okay? So notice my birthday is just the date and the hour and minute, whereas today gives me the full thing. So it's 2020, May 4th. And here's what's weird. When you do this in Replit, you're going to notice that it gives you a strange time. In this case, it's 15:51:42, which is 3:51 and 42 seconds, and then 800,000 microseconds and some change. Okay? Why does it do that? Well, if we go and look up what is UTC time right now, it is 3:52 p.m. UTC time is Coordinated Universal Time. And basically what we use UTC time for is to have a clock that is synchronized around the world to the same time at all times, rather than dealing with things like daylight savings time, where do you live and how do I compare that time to where I live, etc., etc. UTC is always going to be the same time for everyone on the planet. Okay, it was formerly called Greenwich Mean Time. You've also probably seen it called, if you play any kind of military video game or if you've seen, you know, a military movie, you've probably heard it called Zulu time. Those are all the same things. So basically, it's just a universal timestamp, and that timestamp is really common on computing devices like Replit servers. So I think maybe if we say today.tzinfo. No, it's not going to show it to us. I was wondering if it would show us the time zone info, but it's not going to. Don't know why. I'd have to look at it. Doesn't matter. All right, but what we can do is we can say, all right, so what is the diff between now and my b-day? Well, that is something called a time delta. So a time delta represents the difference between two date times, okay? Delta always means difference, at least mathematically. When we hear the word delta, that means a difference. It usually shows up like a little triangle, but it means difference, okay? And so, or change. So anyway, in this case, a time delta is referring to the difference between today and my birthday in terms of days, seconds, and microseconds. Now, you're thinking, well, none of those are hours, but hopefully you realize that in order to calculate the hours between now and my birthday, or my original birthday, right, I need to just multiply days times 24. So I'll say hours since born is diff between now and b-day times 24. All right, and then we're going to print out hours since born. Cool. Wait, what? Hold on a second. We don't want that. That doesn't look right. Hours since born. It's definitely not days. Okay. Oh, whoops. I see what I did wrong. That's a fail. Okay. So it's diff between now and b-day. Let's look at this real quick. Diff between now and b-day. All right. That's my time delta, right? But in order to access just the days, right? If I want to multiply 24 times days, which will give me the correct number of hours, I need to say diff between now and b-day dot days. And that isolates this days value. So that's another cool thing, right? When we think about these time deltas and date times, we're able to isolate these individual attributes so we can perform some kind of calculation. Okay, so I need to say dot days times 24, and then I'll print hours since born. There we go. So I've been alive for 278,000 hours. Here you go. If you watch the lecture, the way of proving you watched the lecture for at least, how long have we been doing this thing? We've been going, where's my time? Oh, it's a stream, so I can't see. Come here. Where are you at? I want to see the time. Oh my gosh. YouTube, I hate you. 25, oh my gosh, 25 minutes. So if you watch this lecture for 25 minutes, I want you to post on Google Classroom what your hours number is. I'd be curious to see. All right, so now I need to tell you about how we can use string parse time and string format time to make this a program that anyone can use. Okay, so right now this is just for me, but we want to make this so that anyone can use this program and find out how many hours they've been alive. So we're going to use script time and struf time, string format time. So string parse time and string format time for a user-oriented program. Now, I'll briefly talk about what each of these does. Okay, string parse time takes a string object and gets a datetime object out of it. So it parses the string, looks at the string and takes the date out of it, or the date time out of it, and gets a datetime object. String format time does the opposite, okay? So string format time takes a datetime object and turns it into a string so you can display it in your code or in the output, right, in the console or wherever it's going, okay? So let's do that. The first thing we need to do is get the user's birthday, and we'll do that through input. And this is going to end up being a string. So we'll say, what is your birthday? Now, the other kind of finicky thing about datetime is that when we use string parse time and string format time, it's really important that the date we are given or the date time we are given follows a specific format. And we can look at the format codes by going back to our documentation, which will make me very bright probably. We'll go home, and if you just look at this link right here, string format time and strip time format codes, you can go and see all the format codes. So for example, rather than showing a weekday or a day as like a number between 1 and 31, you can show it as a weekday, which is pretty cool. So you could figure out like 100 years from now, what 100 years and 8 days from now, like what day will it be? What day of the week? You can show the day of the month as different formats. You can use month as a zero padded decimal number, which is what we're going to do. You can have year with century, so that's pretty common, right? We're usually dealing with years in this format when we're doing computer stuff. Sometimes we show it as a we show it without the century, so like it would be the year 20 right now if we set it without the century. And there's all these other codes, okay? There's a question about this on the quiz, so you should just pop this up while you're taking the quiz and make sure that you're answering it correctly. But don't worry about memorizing these. That would be pointless. I certainly don't have them memorized. But this is where you do find that information when you need it, okay? All right, so we're going to say we want the birthday in this format, very common format. Basically, this means that the user is going to have to give us this format, otherwise our code won't work. So if we were writing a real program, we would provide some kind of like error checking or if statement to say, hey, if the user didn't put their birthday in this way, if we get an error from the datetime library, we got to go fix that. We'll let the user fix it. Okay, so now that we have the user's birthday as a string, we need to convert it into a datetime object, and that requires that we use string parse time. So we'll say user birthday et. We'll say datetime.string parse time. All right. String parse time takes 2 arguments. The first argument is the string we are parsing, which is user birthday. The second argument is the format that the date is coming in. So I want MM in this style. If I go back to my library, I can see that month as a 0 padded decimal number, right? MM should be a %M like this. And then I've got the two numbers for the day And if I go back and look, day of the month as a 0 padded decimal number. You're going to see this term a lot, 0 padded. It just means that if there aren't 2 digits, you know, there's not 1 in the tens place, then we just put a 0 there. That's 0 padded. All right. That's %D. And the last one is the year with the century. So Y. Okay, that's capital Y. And what will happen is that Datetime will interpret these values using these formatters, and it will accept these slashes. So basically you can put elements of the string that exist into this argument, like these slashes. You know, if it were separated by colons like this, that would be kind of weird, but we could come in here and put colons in here as well. Like, I've never seen a date like that. We see times like that. You can do the same thing with dashes, right? That's more common. So this would work as well, but I like the slashes, personally. This is your program. You do whatever you want to. Okay, cool. Now, let's make sure that this works. We're going to get my old hours up there. I can just kind of kill this print statement. Okay, so we're going to enter our birthday. Birthday is August 8, 15, 1988. All right, there's no output because I haven't printed anything, but if we check user birthday DT, check it out. So we get a good datetime object where year is 1988, month is 8, day is 15. Okay, so we use strip time, or string, really what that means is string parse time, to get that value and store it in user birthday DT. All right, next thing is we need to do the same thing we did before. We need to get today, or right now. Okay, that's done. We've got today. And now we calculate the difference. So diff between now and B-Day. I'm going to go kill this old line right here. Drop that out just so it doesn't create any issues. Is going to be today minus user birthday DT. Cool. And now that I've got that, I'm going to use a series of f strings to show the user some information. So we'll say print today is date time, and now because I'm going to be outputting a datetime object to the console, I want it to be pretty. I want to format it in some way. I can say string format time today, and then the values are going to be %m, %d, and %y. So when we do a string format time, we can actually take the datetime object, and we can format it any way we want to. We can format it any way we want to. So if I'll show you that, we can actually go back and change this so it doesn't show up the same way. But let's do this first. So we'll say f today, or excuse me, you were born, date, I got my notes over here, so I keep looking. User birthday, DT. Now if we just use user birthday, this would break, right? We need a datetime object. We need a datetime object for the first argument in our string format time method call. And %d. So why do I keep looking over there? This information is right in front of me. All right, so there's our second string, and I have an error, unterminated string. Okay. Ah. And lastly, which is approximately this many hours ago between user. What did I call this? Diff. Oh, diff between now and B-Day. Dot days. Okay, remember I'm accessing that days attribute of the difference between now and the B-Day. This is a time delta. This is a time delta object right here. I'm accessing that. I'm multiplying by 24. And hours of time. Cool. So let's check this out. Our birthday, August 15th, 1988. All right, so today is May 4th, 2020. You were born on this day. and that's approximately 278,000 hours of time. So, honey, what's up?
Do you know where my vest is?
The last time I saw it, it was under the coffee table.
Under?
Yeah, underneath the coffee table. I saw it. Okay, sorry. My daughter wanted to know where her safari vest was. This is how we use Datetime for something like this. And I wanted to show you, yeah, I said I wanted to show you like how we could change this. So let's do this. Let's go back to the Datetime library. And let's look up how to do this a little bit differently. So we'll say month as the locale's abbreviated name. What's cool about this is if you're running this in a different country, and I'm not sure how that works exactly, but it is locale based. So if you're building this for Germany, for example, it will show that month's name in the correct language, which is pretty awesome. Let's do the full name. So we'll do %B. I think this should work. I forget how this works exactly because it's been a little while, but we'll do it. Okay. So we're going to say %B. That's the month. And then we'll say, so that's going to be August. And then we want the day. The day will be the same. %D. Can you, let's see, can you do the built-in like th or ist? No. You got to be pretty clever to go in there and do the like th and the st and the rd that could come with different values. So that'll be, and we'll do the same here. All right, let's see what happens now. Messed up. Yeah, cool. So when we run this now, notice I changed my format, so I get a different output. I get today is May 4th, or May 4, 2020. I managed to do that wrong. Wow. May 4, 2020, you were born 8/15/1988. That's approximately this many hours of time. Great. You could experiment with this as much as you want. Here's a challenge for you if you want to try this out a little more in practice. So use this to find out how many hours until school ends. Bonus challenge, use this to find out how many hours you're awake until school ends. That ought to be fun. Maybe I'll make that your assignment for next week. So those of you that, again, watch the lecture up until this point, you can go ahead and finish next week's, one of next week's assignments at this point if you just go do those two things. All right. Now, if you don't need any more information, let's see. Let me go check and make sure I've answered all this stuff right here. That's on the quiz. Yes, I have. Great. So I've answered everything that's going to be on the quiz and on your work for this week. But if you want to stick around because you're interested in how you would see this in a real-world application, I'm going to show you that right now. So again, if you're done, if you got all the information you feel like you need, you are definitely ready to take on everything for this week at this point. I'll see you later. And if you want to stick around, I'm going to do one more thing to show you how we would do this in the real world. Okay. So let's go ahead and get rid of all this stuff. All right. And I'm going to give you an example where we would have a checking account. This is, we'll see how robust this program gets. I haven't finished it yet in my notes, but I like the idea. Okay, so let's go ahead and make some classes. All right, we're going to build a checking account class. It's going to have arguments of name, date created. By default, that argument will be the like the time it was created, which should be like right now. So when we create an instance of this class, remember we build classes as blueprints and we create instances of them to actually use them. So whenever we create a new checking account instance, theoretically, its date created should be that moment. There's really no reason it should be any other time. Hold on. Your Pokemon cards are on the art table in your room, I believe. Pokemon. All right, and let's just say that the default balance for this account is $1,000. I don't know why. I just want to have a default argument. Why do I want to do that? That's dumb. Doesn't make any sense. Let's not do it. All right, so self.name is name. A real checking account would obviously have like first name, last name, all sorts of other stuff. Actually, it wouldn't have that. It would have another class here as the like person argument, but I'm not going to do that. Self.date created is date created, and self.balance is balance. What's broken? Non-default argument. Oh, that's right. So we need to move this right here. Balance. There. Your defaults can't be prior to your optional arguments. Undefined name, date, time. Oh yeah. Oops. Bonus for those of you who are still here. If you have stuff like this in a real IDE where it says undefined name, date, time, again, in a real IDE, you can just right-click this and say, bring this into my code, rather than having to go type it. So next year we'll switch to PyCharm maybe, or it's definitely in your senior year you'll be using PyCharm. We'll talk about that stuff. Replet's convenient, but it's not what we really use. Okay, cool. I want to have the ability to show some account data. Remember, when I create an in-class method, it should always include self as a default, or as the minimum number of arguments, or as a minimum argument. I'm going off notes here for right now. I'll go off notes in a second. Somebody's account. Again, this doesn't address if that person's last name ends in an S. It doesn't address that. A good user experience engineer would say, hey, what are you doing, programmer? Fix that. And they'd be right. It should look better. I'm using double quotes because I don't want to have to deal with weird errors. It's going to be an amount of money. And we'll go ahead and format it properly. Great. All right, let's make a checking account or two just to test this out. New ACTP is a checking account, and the name is Bob, and Bob has a balance of $10,000 dues. All right, so we got new ACCT. What? Excuse me? Oh, it's running main. Ugh. I hate this about Replit. I just want to run this one. Okay. Well, hold on. We'll grab this. We'll go ahead and import this. So we'll say from bank account, import checking account. All right, cool. There we go. New ACCT. All right, new ACCT dot show account data. Great. So Bob's account they created was 2020-05-04 at this time exactly. Balance is $10,000. Now that date time is a little busted, so I'm going to go and fix that up. So I'll say, obviously we don't want it to show as like a full-blown datetime object. We'll go and fix this. We'll say self.dateCreated, and then we'll actually need to call the datetime here. So we'll say datetime.string format time, self.dateCreated, and we'll throw out just a regular date like this. D%y. And then we need to switch these to single quotes, of course. I did the opposite in the lecture code. Cool. All right. Anything else? Bob's account. I don't like this. New line. Cool. All right. That should be better looking. So we'll do new ACCT show account data. Nice. Okay. So now I'm going to show you something called composition. And composition is where a class has another class as part of that class, really. So if you think about what would a checking account have as part of a checking account, well, it would have transactions. So every checking account is going to have lots of transactions. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another set of transactions. It's going to be a list for right now. I think that's the simplest one. Actually, we can make that a tuple. All right. So transactions is going to hold all the transactions that we perform with this account. Okay. So we could say, let's see, we're going to do a deposit. and we'll just pass here. And do a withdrawal. So, pass. Now, if you think, what would you need for a deposit or withdrawal, we would need an amount. But let's kind of see what happens when we build this transaction. So a transaction is a complex thing, right? Really, basically, a transaction is like, okay, well, some money enters an account or leaves an account, but transactions are also loaded with other pieces of data, like who did you pay? With what card did you make that payment? Where was it? What time was it? And that's really the thing. Like, we want to see how would we include that time element with a transaction, and the obvious answer really is by using a separate class to represent each transaction. That's what object-oriented programming is all about, is that we recognize when we have these like multifaceted objects, these multifaceted pieces of data, that we should be using classes for most of them. Or we could use something called a named tuple, but we're going to do it with a class. I haven't done this yet, so we're going to see what happens. But anyway, I'm trying to think. A reason that it's important that we keep track of time with our transactions, you want to know like when you spent that money. The bank wants to know when you spent that money so it can credit and debit accounts correctly. But it's also important for like preventing fraud. Okay, so if a bank can see that 40 transactions occurred in the last 30 seconds, well, that's physically impossible. I can't think of any situation where that would be possible with a normal checking account. Now you could think like, all right, well, actually I have a Robinhood account and I'm making stock trades, like on puts or short or whatever you call them. Anyway, that's a possibility, but we're just talking about a basic checking account. Let's write some code. All right, so when I think about a transaction, it's going to have a amount, payee, like who we paid, and then the date of transaction. And that's going to be at that moment, right? The moment that transaction occurs, I would think that's, what we would want there. All right, so self.amount is amount, self.payee is payee, and self.date of tx is date of tx. TX, transfer, transaction. All right, so let's see. If we make a deposit, that's going to be a transaction. If we make a withdrawal, that's going to be a transaction. So that means that self.transactions will need to append tx. And then we would need to, if it's a deposit, we're going to say self.transactions. Nope, no, we say self.balance plus equals tx.amt, which is going to be our AMT attribute from here. I think this is going to work. This sounds right. It's been a long time since I could. Self.transactions. We're still going to append this. And then we'll say self.balance minus equal tx. AMT. I don't know if this makes sense yet. I'm just kind of coding on the fly. All right, let's do some stuff. Let's go over here and use these things. So we've got a new account. Let's say that we have a new account dot deposit, right? And that expects a TX, right? A transaction. So let's build a transaction. Let's say bought pizza. And that's going to be a transaction. Import checking account and transaction. Yep. Transaction. Okay, so the amount, let's say, is $25. Do $25. Payee is Papa John. I hate Papa John's. Max Dough House. Yeah. All right, and then the data transaction is automatic. Okay, so that's a withdrawal. This doesn't make sense now. Like, withdrawal. I shouldn't have to say, like, it was a withdrawal in order for bought pizza to be. There's probably some way to handle that, but I don't know. Let's see. Got a check from mom. Transaction. Okay. Got a nice check from mom. And then who's the payee? Yes, me, son. All right, cool. And then we'll do a new account. Dot deposit. That's a check from mom. I guess that kind of makes sense. Oh, ugh. Tuple object has no attribute. Oh, that's right. Let's just make a list. I think about that a little more. It's not like I'm going to go modify those transactions. All right, so let's see new ACCT. Let's see new account dot show account data. All right, cool. So we have a balance of 10,075, which is correct. You know, we withdrew 25 and we deposited 100, so the net is 75. And then we can kind of take a look at new account and say, like, what were our transactions? Okay, so now we have these objects, right? What we want instead of these objects, and this is the last thing I'm going to show you because we're kind of getting in the weeds. But rather than these objects just showing up, we want a nice like view of what the transaction was. So what we're going to do with class transaction is we're going to create what's called a repr method. And we're going to learn more about this next year. But a repr method is what allows us to show a class, like to show an object, but give more interesting information than this object at this memory address, because that's just boring and it's not helpful. So we'll say we're going to return a string that will be an F string, and it will be, let's see, we'll say self dot amount .2f for self.payee on self.date of tx. Oh, and we need to make that a nicely formatted thing. So let's go just grab this thing. And in addition to the date, we probably want the hour as well. So let's throw that in there. I gotta remember how to do that. What's going on with this freaking string here? Oh, I've got the single quotes. All right, so let's add some other time data. Let's do a 12-hour clock. %I, %M. All right, so we'll do just the. So we'll do % at this time. Cool. Now this should work much better. All right, so new account. Oh well, we didn't do that one, so we'll do new account dot show account data. Bob's account, and then new account dot transactions. Oh, data of tx. Fail. New account dot transactions. Whoops, we forgot to format. Wait, what's wrong with the, oh, .2f. I was like, what the heck? Why is that showing up? New account dot transactions. All right, there you go. So $25 for Max Stowehouse on 5/4/2020. Really, if you wanted to be, an awesome person, you would just go in here and you would get rid of, or not get rid of, you'd say show transactions, right? Show tx self, and then we would just say for tx in self.transactions, print tx, and that will look much better. Show tx. Great. That's it. So that's a real world example of how you would really see Datetime, like in some kind of program. I mean, real world, it's definitely not like how this actually works altogether, but it's generally how it works. Okay, it's not highly detailed, but it's generally how it works. All right, don't forget, what am I saying? If you've made it this far in the lecture, I don't need to tell you anything. If you have questions, just let me know. I'll answer them. Good luck with this week's work. And if you are still with me and you want to get an idea of what we're going to be doing for that final project, go and check out this thing called a Pomodoro timer. And this is a cool one to look at. Pomodoro timer is a system of time management, and it works really well. So, something for you to check out. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I'll see you next time. At some point, I'm going to close this down. Here we go. Here we go. I'm on it. I'm on it.